I got my laptop on my knee, chasing numbers like a bee. NFL stacks on a Sunday, it's the life for me. Chasing data down the digital road. NFL stats, that's my country code. Yards, touchdowns, all that jazz. I'm sifting through data, it's the stats man's task. From the draft to the Super Bowl, I'm on this chase. NFL stats are my kind of place. Chasing data with my digital pen. NFL stats, I'll chase them again. So here's to the numbers, the plays and the score. Chasing NFL data forever.
Do it live! Fuck it! Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
What's up, everybody? We're here with our second episode of Chasing Data. Thanks for joining in. Last week, I had a guest on the show, and we broke down Super Bowl, looked at a few things, as far as the best contracts, tag options for the season. But now we'll get into the bulk of what we're going to do for most of the offseason. We'll pay attention to the storylines that come and go throughout the offseason. But what we're going to do here is we're going to reverse power rank all the teams, starting at 32 and going all the way up to 1 by the time the season starts back up. In that time, we may do 1 or 2 teams each night. And what I'm going to do is going to break down the roster, going to look at their strengths, their weaknesses, what they need to do in the draft until the draft gets here, and then grade what they've done in the draft once we get to those teams. We'll also talk about their schedule for the next season, who can be the most improved player, who's the X factor for this team, and what's the overall outlook for these teams as we rank them in reverse order. So like I said, we will start at the bottom and work our way up. But before we get into that, let's hear a few words from our sponsors.
For the best Italian food in Western New York, Elliot Apollo's, call 716-825-3675. The Lardon Construction Group.
Fubo TV, the official streaming service of Do Champions. FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Do Champions.
For all your summertime needs, beauty pools, as well as kayak pools.
CX Chronicles, your total customer solutions focused manager. W.GG, the official energy drink of Do Champions.
Hey, Sons of Erie, our artwork looks better on your walls. Hamburg Brewing, please visit our tap room on Boston State Road, Hamburg, New York. And finally,
Fat Boy Surf Club for all your surfing needs.
So like I said, we will start with the worst team, in my opinion, and work our way up. If you have any thoughts or comments or questions, just type it in and I'll get to them as I can. So number 32, close your ears if you're a Tennessee fan, because as of right now, to me, they are the worst ranked team in the NFL. The season was horrible last year. They were 3-14. They lost 6 straight. They ended as bad as that losing streak. They ended up putting 13 points up against Jacksonville in week 17. If you can't score against Jacksonville, who can you score against? They went back and forth between Will Levis and Mason Rudolph, and nothing ever really clicked. They made a few changes, not a lot. They keep their offensive and defense coordinator. They did bring in a new GM, Mike Borgonzi, who was the assistant GM in KC. They get rid of the old one. He's had a few years, and he's out the door. He did not make enough splash moves or didn't pick the right quarterback. Is that on him? Is that on the coaching staff? Did not work out. So Nick Holtz is the offense coordinator. They had the 31st ranked offense in the NFL last year. Passing offense was last. The run was ranked 26th. And if you watch this team, you see a pattern that happened all throughout the season. Yes, they had Will Levis and Mason Rudolph, who are not great quarterbacks, but the problem that I saw over and over is the fact that every first down, or a majority of the first downs, they're running the ball. They were next to worst in pass play percentage on first down. So they can't run the ball. They run the ball on first down. Then they're in second and long. They're behind the sticks, no playmakers with Levis. So that just plays into, and it just like snowballs into why their offense was so bad this season. Denard Wilson was the defense coordinator. They did have the 20th overall ranked defense. When you think about the defense for Tennessee, you could say, yeah, they're bad. I mean, they were not great by any means, but you look at that offense and they put them in a lot of terrible situations. The turnovers they're not ever having great field position. Special teams was not good either. So they ended up being 9th in run D and 22nd in the pass. Now that run D may be skewed a little bit. Sorry, the pass is kind of skewed. They were behind a lot of those games. So I don't know. This is their first NFL head coordinator jobs for both of them, and they're going in season 2. We'll see what happens. The other good thing they have going for them right now is that they have the number 1 pick in the draft. So there's huge decisions to be made going forward. So that's just a general overview as we get started. We will now. We're going to talk about their additions. So they don't really have any additions yet, but they do have the draft coming up. And with the draft coming up, I did a mock draft like everyone else. And we'll discuss kind of what they need and kind of how I ended up on these picks. Once the draft gets here, we'll revisit and see how well they actually did. So, they have the first pick. I don't know. Are they going to trade this pick? I'm not really sure. If they keep it, I don't know if you can take Shador or Cam Ward first. It would be a big swing for sure. They may be better off waiting to like the 2nd, 3rd, 4th round to pick someone else. But with me, I went with Travis Hunter first, the cornerback out of Colorado. I mean, he's a great press corner. He has obviously he has great hands. He's got the instincts, the skills. He's a game changer. I mean, he's supposed to be going to the combine as a cornerback. But I mean, could you get some wide receiver snaps out of him? Who knows? I mean, like I said, he's a playmaker. So 1-1 pick right there. So in the 2nd round, they have the 35th pick overall. They got to shore up that offensive line. So I went with Connerly, the tackle out of Oregon. He started 28 games in the last 2 seasons at left tackle. He's quick. He's good when he's working the next level on runs. And I mean, their run game was not the best, to say the least, in Tennessee. Go to the 4th round. They don't have any 3rd round picks. 4th round, 101 overall. This is where I have them taking their quarterback instead of spinning it all. If they keep that number 1 pick, they take Jackson Dart here. I mean, he showed flashes at Ole Miss. You got to take a chance on a quarterback. I mean, the free agent field is not substantial, to say the least. I mean, you got the likes of Sam Darnold, which we'll get into that later. Justin Fields is maybe your 2nd best option at quarterback in free agency. Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston. So you have to take a chance on quarterback at some point in this draft. And I think it's Jackson Dart here in the 4th round. Their 2nd, 4th round pick, I have Ahmed Hassanin. He had 10 sacks last year. To me, he's worth a shot. Shore up that defensive line with Jeffrey Simmons and Tavondre Sweat. 5th round, Ben Urasic. He's tight end 2, he could be tight end 2 behind Okonkwo. Maybe we get some repeat of Brock Bowers. It's a long shot, but worth a shot. Take a center in the 5th round, add more to that offensive line, and then you get into your linebacker play. Take the one from Minnesota and Trader Jr. to end it up. I mean, 7th round, you're just taking. They won't say shots in the dark, but it's a big swing at that point. So, like I said, they do have a good assortment of picks, and they don't have any additions yet for the offseason. We will get more additions as free agency opens up and the draft, obviously. So we will go into their subtractions. I'm going to bring up their depth chart here. So the free agents that they've lost this offseason, I mean, like I said, we are not to the point of re-signing anyone yet. We will see what happens with them. But so got the depth chart. I'm going to try to work my way through it here. Some of the players that they lost. Nick Westbrook-Akine. He was just catching touchdowns is pretty much all he did. I mean, he was not ranked very highly as a wide receiver. They lost Tyler Boyd, who they brought in on that 1-year contract. I honestly thought Tyler Boyd coming in from Cincinnati last year was going to be that wide receiver 2 for them, or wide receiver 3 whenever they had DeAndre Hopkins. So, I mean, them not getting anything really out of either one of those, they didn't really lose anyone. They lose their right guard. They lose Mason Rudolph. again, they're looking to the future in the quarterback room. Will Levis is not it. I mean, all he's ever done the entire 2024 season was produce memes. That's all he was good for. They did lose Nick Van Ett, who did show he had a few splash plays those last 2 weeks of the season. He was their tight end too. Sebastian Joseph Day on the D line. He was ranked 20. He was one of their bigger losses, maybe even their biggest so far. He was ranked 23rd out of 118 defensive linemen by PFF. So a big loss. Jerome Baker, who they traded for midseason, they kind of rotated linebackers. Nothing really worked out too well. And then if Joseph Day wasn't your biggest loss on this team in free agency, it's Quandre Diggs, the safety. He was ranked 20th out of 98 safeties. So definitely a top one of the more top end talents in this on this depth chart. So they lose 8 relevant players, but no one that's too much of a game changer for sure. Watching and listening, I got some opinions. Share the opinions. I'd love to hear them for sure. So now we talk a little bit about their cap situation. I'll leave the depth chart up as we discuss this. They have $50 million in cap space, which is a good amount, especially with the cap increasing a substantial amount from what we expected. This going into 2025 is the 10th most, so they're on the top third of the league in cap space. There's not really anyone that they will be cutting, releasing. I mean, from my viewpoint, I mean, options could be Cushenberry, their center. He was ranked near the bottom in all categories as a center, but I mean, he's not worth the cut or trade. You still have so much dead money. You're not saving anything if you let him go. The other option is Chidobe Awuzie, who they brought in. I mean, from Cincinnati, he's a $12.5 million dead cap if it's a post June 1st cut. He was ranked in the bottom half of cornerbacks. I mean, you would save $4.5 million this year, but I mean, it's not realistic to me to cut him when he's in the prime of his career. This team is not about, like, it's not like they have other people that's going to step up. You might as well keep what you have. If you trade him, you save $12 million if it's post June 1st, 9.5 if it's before June 1st. So, but still, he's not worth trading. You might as well hold on to him. So, when you look at the strengths of this team, I mean, maybe their biggest strength is having the number 1 pick. I mean, there's a lot they could do with it. I have them keeping it in the mock draft, but there is an option where they trade it to one of the other teams that's quarterback needy. Maybe they're not sold on taking Cam Ward or Shador at number 1, which would be understandable. They trade it and load up for the future. I mean, they get more draft capital this year. Maybe there's other players they like it 3, 4, 5, 6. Later on in the first round, we'll see. Other strengths that they actually do already have is Jeffrey Simmons, who probably their best player on this team. He was great. I mean, another good season. He was ranked 8th out of 118 defensive linemen, 80.2 PFF grade. He had 5 sacks and 50 tackles, which is the most for any defensive interior player in the league this year. He was ninth. They had the 9th best run D, and he was part of it. Also another strength right next to him, Tavondre Sweat, the rookie out of Texas. I mean, he was a top 15 player this year in his position. I mean, he came in and shined when given the opportunity. Outside of that, I mean, it's hard to find strengths on this team. I mean, this depth chart, when you look at it, there is not a lot that stands out. I mean, that's why I have him number 32 in my power rankings. I mean, you could say the pass defense, not really. They gave up the second fewest pass yards, but that's partially due to the fact the teams were always ahead when playing them. So they're running the ball. They're not passing. So, I mean, the pass yardage per game is probably going to be skewed. They did make big trades. They brought in a lot of players that were in their prime age-wise or maybe a little bit older. L'Jarius Sneed was one of them. I mean, he was outstanding in Kansas City. He gets here. I mean, he did not have a great year. You would assume that next year he's going to bounce back, be that CB1 that they need him to be. It was a down year, but, I mean, he cannot repeat what he did this year after how he had such a great run in Kansas City. And like I said, a strength for me is that cap space. I mean, they have $50 million to do something with. Uh, Kind of go splurging. I mean, you're not really playing to. I don't know if you're playing to make the playoffs this year. You're just trying to improve on from where you were at last year. And they're giving this coaching staff a second go round, see if they can do anything to improve from where they were at last year. Weaknesses everywhere. I mean, they are not loaded anywhere, so they are weak all over. They were the 31st ranked team per PFF, 62.5 grade. So I mean, not good. No explosive plays. You watch film, you look at the stats. It's a it's a lot of you get angry if you're a Tennessee Titans fan, that's for sure. Um, it's no explosive plays. They have the seventh fewest with 43. I mean, but the lowest in the league. An explosive play, for people who don't know, what they consider explosive plays are pass plays that are 20 or more yards, or run plays that are 10 or more yards. They had 43 the entire season. That's around 2.5 per game. Like I said, they had 43, which is the seventh fewest. The fewest in the league was 40. And I mean, you can excel. I mean, Kansas City was right where they were at, or a little bit lower in explosive plays, but I mean, they have Patrick Mahomes. I mean, they're going to dink and dunk and go down the field the entire game, but they're moving the ball. The problem with the Titans is they had no explosive plays, but they're also not moving the ball and they're turning it over. Another weakness, that offensive line. I mean, they're losing a starter, but I mean, does it really change much? I mean, they need to shore up a lot of what's going on, especially at right tackle. They got the draft picks. Again, they could run it back. I mean, they took Latham last year. Sorry. Yeah, they took Latham last year, Skoronski the year before. I mean, it's not working out as well as they probably wanted it to. The other weakness that I see on this team, especially, they're losing wide receiver 2 and 3. So you look at your depth chart, they have no depth, honestly. Calvin Ridley's number 1. And then you have Traylon Burks, Bryce Oliver, Tay Martin. I mean, this is people that, I mean, unless you're a diehard Titans fan, you haven't even heard of these players. I mean, Traylon Burks was drafted real early, but he has not lived up to what they wanted him to be. I mean, they have Tony Pollard, Calvin Ridley. Outside of that, can Tajay Spears do something? I mean, in the game at the end of the season, he did show a few flashes whenever Pollard was out, but I don't think he's shown up to what they want him to be. Is that more the offensive line? Is it him? I mean, Ridley and Pollard, yeah, they were their two weapons. They were ranked 39th and 40th, respectively, in their positions for the 2024 season. Pollard had a little over 1,000 yards on 4.2 yards per carry. Ridley had 64 receptions, right over 1,000 yards receiving, and just 4 touchdowns. Like I said, they have no depth because outside of Calvin Ridley, no one else on this roster had 500 or more receiving yards. Like, I mean, yes, the quarterback play, yes, the offensive line, but they have no go-getters, no home run threats, nothing on this offense. So they really need to restock. Like I said, they're a long ways away from competing, but they definitely have some holes on this team, especially on the offensive side. I mean, the weaknesses, it showed everywhere as far as the offense. They were 27th in points per game at 18.7, 26th in yards per game at right over 300. And then you look at the defense. They had the third most points per game allowed, 27.1. But again, that goes back to special teams being horrible and this offense being horrible, setting them up, putting them in bad situations, the defense in bad situations. I mean, the pass, I mean, I don't know. The run D looks good. Like I said, they were ranked ninth best. They have Jeffrey Simmons, Tavondre Sweat. They look great. And then you get to the end of the season, week 18. Yeah, they probably had given up on the season. And they gave up 163 yards on the ground to Dameon Pierce, who is the backup to Joe Mixon on the Texans, who have the worst. They had the worst offensive line out of any playoff team. Like I said, they probably gave up. It was week 18. Playing against one of the worst offensive lines, they only had a 16.7% pressure rate on the quarterback, which was C.J. Stroud and Davis Mills. I mean, regardless, they got to do something. They have no depth at edge. I don't know. You just got to close your eyes and pray the next season is better at this point. I mean, not a good look to end the season. So, I mean, like I said, I've hit a lot of these points. My outlook for them is it hinges on what they do in this draft. They really need to hit in this draft because they have so many holes. So many holes on this roster. They just need to improve all around. I had them taking Jackson Dart in the 4th round. They got to take a quarterback. They got to get somebody else in the QB room. Do something. They can't run it back with Will Levis. Mason Rudolph is a free agent. So, I mean, they have to do something to make it better in that quarterback room. I mean, I don't know. Do they swing big and take Cam or Shador and just hope for the best? Because, I mean, outside of that, in free agency, it's Sam Darnold. I mean, that's the quote unquote big name in free agency. Do you go get Kirk Cousins? I mean, somebody's got to eat that salary if you go get Kirk Cousins. And I don't think you pay Sam Darnold what he's wanting. I know you have the cap space, but I mean, there's no point in breaking the bank for Darnold when they're not close to competing or contending with or without him. I mean, they bring him in. What are they at best? A 500 team if he plays like he did in Minnesota last year. I mean, when that offensive line in Minnesota started breaking down, he started seeing ghosts again. It was like he was reliving his days in New York. It was not good. So I would not spend money on him. The only way I would get him is if you trade that number 1 pick and you can get a haul of a return and build out the roster around him. You're expecting this, you get a ton of picks and you can just try to take as many swings, many throws at the board, try to fill out this roster and maybe you bring him in to see what the rest of the roster can do around him. But I mean, honestly, it's going to be another season of rebuilding. If they can figure out how to get to 500 in 2025, to me, that would be promising. Because, I mean, as bad as they looked this past season, 500 would be great. They still need to shore up that offensive line. I mean, the free agents, the 2 big names, Ronnie Stanley, Trey Smith. I mean, Trey Smith's probably better than Ronnie Stanley, a little bit younger, but I mean, they sure could use them. Weapons, like I said, this depth chart, there's a lot of mid-tier people that they could bring in. But I mean, the big names that you see that you want to maybe bring into this team, especially if you're drafting a quarterback, put him in the best position to succeed. They have Chris Godwin, who's out there, the wide receiver. Hollywood Brown, maybe a home run threat. I mean, he drops a lot of those potential home run balls that are thrown to him, but worth a shot. Bring in Jawan Johnson, the best tight end free agent. Pair him with Chig Okonkwo and see what happens. Like I said, you got to put the new quarterback because you can't run it back with Will Levis. You got to put him in a spot to succeed. So we will see. Let's go to their schedule. We don't know their exact schedule yet, but this is who they will play this year. I mean, their home games, I'm going to run through it real quick because, I mean, there's still a lot of the offseason left as to who's going to be on these rosters. Quickly going through this, Kansas City, loss. Chargers, loss. I mean, the Titans are not going to live up or match up well to any of these teams. The Rams, they could pull out a win. I mean, if they get rid of Matthew Stafford and start their rebuild. But that front 4 against this offensive line is not going to be ideal. Seattle, toss up at best. New England, they could win that game. I mean, New England's going to be near the bottom in these rankings as well. So, that's one win, between them and Seattle. They'll win one of those 2. New Orleans, possible. New Orleans is going to be rebuilding. They have a horrible cap situation. They have a lot that they need to do to get into the 2025 season in order to be under the salary cap. Houston, no. Indy, I mean, Anthony Richardson does not look like he's the answer yet in Indy, so they could pull out one of those 2 games with Indy. Maybe the home one they win. Jacksonville, split at best. You look at the away games. Denver's on the rise. They're a tier or 2 above what Tennessee is doing. The Raiders, not a good team. Could pull out the victory there against them. You look at the Cardinals, probably not a win. Niners, probably not a win. Browns, they could win that one. That's another team that could be rebuilding, could be getting rid of Myles Garrett moving forward. Just completely blow that up, Deshaun Watson and everything. Houston, Indy already spoke on them, and Jacksonville splitting. So, I mean, you look at that. I mean, they could go 5-12, 6-11. I mean, we're getting close to 500. They were 3-14 this year. So, I mean, any improvement, 6-11 or better would be a successful season to me. So, I mean, we spoke about this roster a good bit. Their top players to me, I mean, they have Calvin Ridley, Tony Pollard, uh, Jeffrey Simmons, and Tavondre Sweat. Outside of that, bunch of mid-tier replacement level players for sure. I mean, to have 4 players that are good, above average, not ideal. With each team, I'll look at their MVP or most improved player candidates. There is nobody on this team that's going to be an MVP unless Jeffrey Simmons just shocks the world and becomes the greatest defensive player in the offseason. I don't foresee it. Most improved player, JC Latham is an option. He had a 62 PFF grade. His run block was even worse. So he has a lot of room for improvement. He has a lot of leeway to get much better. Another one that I see, even though he was good, was Tavondre Sweat. I mean, maybe he's ready to take that next leap in year 2. He was dominant at times for sure in year 1. He had 31 tackles, 2 sacks, and had the 10th best run grade in the NFL amongst defensive interior players. So, I mean, the best outcome for me for this team, like just complete ceiling of 2025 season, is, even though I don't have them doing it, is taking Cam Ward maybe, or Shador somehow, or trading back and getting one of them, or somehow bringing in a functional quarterback. They have not had functionality in this offense as of late. If they do that and work towards the future and finish at 500, I mean, that would be, if you're a Titans fan, that has to be extremely successful and looking forward to the future. That's the best outcome. I mean, worst outcome is we as in Titans fandom, are not getting the worst outcome is not getting a quarterback. You go through 2025 and you're still in the same position, don't know the quarterback of the future, and you're getting a top 3 pick again. Or what's even worse is getting a quarterback. You swing big on Cam or Shador, and neither one of them are good. And then you're back in the same spot next year, maybe in a worse situation because you used all that big draft capital to miss. Drop-off candidates, I'll talk about this with every team. But, I mean, I don't know who was good enough on this team to be a true drop-off candidate. X factor for me, Nick Holtz. I mean, he has to make this offense into something after it was absolutely nothing last year. How he retained his job is I'm kind of unsure about that one, but maybe they get a better quarterback, O-line improves a little bit, get a few more weapons, and he can take them from 31st to 21st. I mean, that would be a reasonable jump. So, I mean, in summary, this team's a long way from competing. They need to find the quarterback of the future and take the next step forward this season. Or Brian Callahan and his coordinators are probably out the door. I mean, this is season 2, so if there's no substantial improvement, it's over. So that concludes our number 32 team, the absolute worst in the league. We will now be moving on to number 31. And I'm sure some of you have an opinion about that, but to me, it is going to be the Las Vegas Raiders at 31. So at 31, Las Vegas, 4-13 last year, 1 game better than the Titans. And again, this is my ranking as of right now, based on their current roster. These rankings could change if these teams make splash trades, knock the draft out of the park, completely miss on the draft. I mean, you can't go much lower than 31, 32, but this is where they're at for right now. So at 31, like I said, 4-13. They had won 2 of their last 3, but that wasn't enough to give Antonio Pierce his job for the 2025 season. They lost 10 straight at one point. That's what sealed his fate right there. He was only there for 1 full season after being the interim coach 2 years ago. Pete Carroll's in now. I think Pete Carroll's around 73 years old. So, I mean, I thought that once they signed him, or once they brought him in as the head coach, they were going to be looking for someone who's a younger offensive defensive coordinator that would be almost like a succession plan going into the future. Pete Carroll would play out his contract as a coach, assuming things go well, and then one of those coordinators would take his spot. Well, they brought in Chip Kelly, and they kept Patrick Graham, their defensive coordinator. Chip Kelly, I mean, he looked great last year. this offense was horrible. So, I mean, you can only go up from where they were at last year. They were the 27th overall ranked offense. They were ranked 31st in pass and 32nd in run. So, they were already at the bottom. They're in the basement with this offense, so they can only go up from there. They kept Patrick Graham, even though their defense was ranked 29th. They were 12th in run D, last in pass defense. So not ideal. Give him another run at it. Defense, whenever 2 years ago, whenever Antonio Pierce took over as the interim head coach, he had that defense like playing out of their mind. I remember the pick sixes at the end of the season. It was just the team was so hyped. They were smoking the cigars in the locker room after wins. You thought the stock was going up. It was going up for 2024, which was not the case. Absolutely not. I was surprised that they regressed to the extent that they did. But I mean, try again 2025. They have the number 6 pick in the draft. So they didn't, even though they finished with the 6th worst record, they're the next to worst team going into 2025 as of right now, according to me. Is any quarterback going to be available? Is Aiden O'Connell going to run it back? Not really sure. So let's get into look at their mock draft that I did for them. Because, I mean, again, we don't have any additions yet. It's the off season just started. Super Bowl just ended. So with their mock draft at 6, I'm not sure Cam or Shador is going to be available to them. I mean, if they're there at 6, they have to take the swing. I mean, is it still too high of a draft pick for them? Potentially, but you need a quarterback of the future. So looking at this mock draft that I did, I have them taking Ashton Genty at 6 overall. I mean, you get into the argument of taking a running back that early on. You're kind of overpaying them versus what you. It's a lot of back and forth with taking one that early on. Because, I mean, you could argue that running backs come a dime a dozen. I mean, they could be anywhere. You could get one in the 5th round that's just as good as the 1st round pick. But, I mean, what we saw him do last year at Boise State was kind of unheard of. I mean, he was near breaking every record. He had almost 2,600 yards on the ground at 6.9 yards per carry and 29 touchdowns. I mean, it's hard to pass him up, especially when this run offense was horrible. When the offensive line is not the worst. So have the Raiders taking him first. And in the 2nd round, Siobhan Revelle out of East Carolina got injured, I believe, last year. He's fast. He's long at 6'3". He's physical. You watch him, he's physical at the catch point, especially with that length and the speed that he has. If he falls to you in the 2nd round, to me, you have to take him. He could be CB1 on this roster from day one. 3rd round, if they don't take a quarterback in the 1st round, they could trade back. I mean, there's always trade possibilities with these teams. I have them taking Dylan Gabriel out of Oregon. This is lofty goals, but I mean, Bo Nix 2.0. Not really playing similar, but I mean, if you get that, he has to have more mobility than Aiden O'Connell. I mean, Aiden O'Connell, you need to bring someone in to compete with him. Have another option if they don't draft someone this year. Get into that in a minute. But, I mean, Aiden O'Connell has 0 pocket mobility. You watch him. He's going through his progressions. If a lane opens, he's not taking it. If he does take it, he's taking it at about 5 miles per hour. Very awkward when he runs. So, I mean, in today's NFL, you need a dual threat quarterback, or at least have the ability to be a dual threat quarterback. Aiden O'Connell does not have that. And what stood out to me with Aiden O'Connell is, like, if he did have those receivers open in intermediate or deep, he could hit on those. He's average, slightly above average on those throws. He ranked between like 14th and 19th on intermediate and deep throws, which is 10 to 19 air yards and then 20 plus air yards. On short throws, which is anything less than 10 air yards, he was horrible. He was like in the bottom 5, which you can make it make sense because I don't understand it. In 3rd round, I have them taking another cornerback, maybe follow in Philadelphia's footsteps in the 2024 draft whenever they took Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. became CB1, CB2 for them. Stood out in the Super Bowl. So if you're the Raiders, why don't you give that a shot? They take a safety in the 4th round. They stocking up on defense because this defense was awful. There's a lot of holes. At least you have weapons on offense. You got a few on defense, but that secondary definitely needs some help. Take a defensive interior in the 5th round. Maybe get someone behind. I'm not saying it has to be these exact players, but you need to have someone to have a succession plan to Christian Wilkins or be there when he's injured like he was in 2024. He is getting a little bit up in age, so why not take a swing at that? 6th round, I have them taking a linebacker. My problem with linebackers, people will argue, not to say that they're wrong, but people will argue that they watch linebackers on film in college and they can project what they're going to do in the NFL. To me, you have no earthly idea for a lot of reasons. But the main reason is that the college game is so different compared to the NFL. The run scheme is different. The hashes are in a different spot. You have receivers lined up near the edge of the field. At the out of bound at the boundaries. So it's almost like you want to take someone athletic and hope that they hit as far as the mental capability of the game of football. So you can take a swing. There's no linebackers, no Brian Urlachers. That linebacker prototype is gone. Got to have someone who's athletic to keep up with these running backs out of the backfield. So it's kind of take a swing and see what happens. Appreciate it, Jake. Still got a lot left with this analysis. So then looking forward, I have them taking 2 of the same type of receiver 4 picks away. Trey Tucker kind of was that speed guy, but you take one of these 2. If you take Chisholm the 3rd, and then go follow it up with Jimmy Horn, it's kind of hard to pass up that name of Jimmy Horn Jr. Saints people know Jim Horn, that is his son. See what he can do. Need some playmakers for sure. And then with the last pick, shore up that O-line. Take a chance on Logan Brown, tackle out of Kansas. An addition besides the draft to me is that they're going to have a healthier D-line, hopefully with Max Crosby, who is a top 5 edge rusher in the NFL. He's going to be back. Christian Wilkins is going to be back. So, kind of what you wanted to see last year out of the 2, they can get a whole season out of them. And that will take them a long ways for sure. So I believe they had one more draft pick than the Tennessee Titans. Jake says taking both of the cornerbacks would be a nasty 1-2 combo. Change that defense. Like I said, you kind of hope that they can follow the footsteps. A lot of people, or a substantial amount of people, question what Philadelphia was doing, especially when they already had cornerbacks in that defensive room last year. But this defense needs a lot of help. So you take best player available at a lot of these positions because they have a lot of gaps. Outside of tight end, you take best available if I'm the Raiders staff. So we will, by the way, those 6th-round picks, they're compensatory picks that they got earlier on. All right, let's bring up their depth chart. So looking at what they had, subtractions, they lost 17 free agents, or on the verge of losing 17. They could bring some of them back. But there's a ton of green and black on this depth chart, if you can see it. They lost some good players. They lost some bad players. They're losing their center that started at one point. Cody Whitehair, doesn't matter. He was no good this year for the Raiders. They lose both of their running backs, Amir Abdullah, Alexander Madison. They kind of switch back and forth who was in that running back room. Going into the season, you thought it was Zamir White's job to lose, which he lost. Definitely lost it. Did not show anything. Nobody in this running back room showed anything. Amir Abdullah was the best ranked running back. He was 40th out of 59 qualifying running backs in the NFL. So not a lot to be lost in this room. Sincere McCormick had a few flashy plays, at the end of the season, but they definitely need to shore up their running back room. They lose Malcolm Kuntz on the defensive line. Divine Diablo, linebacker, speedy linebacker, a great linebacker to play with in Madden. If you play Madden to user him, top end speed, so great in that sense. Outside of that, yeah. They lose Robert Spillane, who was ranked 31st among linebackers, so top half, I should say. They lose one of the more important players on this defense, Trevon Merrick. He was ranked 36th in his position. He's a TCU star. I mean, he had 104 tackles this last year. He improved upon where he was in years prior. That was a career high in tackles. I really think they need to re-sign him in this secondary. Have them taken a lot of defensive players, but they definitely need him to. I don't know. It's almost a veteran presence on that back end, even though he's not really a veteran. He had 2 interceptions last year, so I mean he can go to the ball and get it. They're losing Isaiah Polamau. Terrible, honestly, this past season, and they lose Nate Hobbs. So that's their quote unquote key losses. When you look at their cap situation, Tennessee had $50 million going into 2025, which was the 10th most. The Raiders have $95 million. They have the second most in the NFL. I mean, they are primed to spend money. Do they want to spend money? Not really sure because, again, they're in that position to not really compete, especially in the AFC West that had 3 teams with winning records and 3 teams that made the playoffs last year. When you look at their cap situation as far as who's on their roster, Christian Wilkins is a big one. He came from Miami. They expected him to be a stud in the defensive interior, which he can be. I mean, I'm not saying he can't be, but he has to be healthy. He's owed $33 million. Played 246 snaps last year. He just needs to be healthy, but he's going on 30 years old. That's why I had them taking a somewhat of a succession plan, at least some depth at the defensive interior so they can improve or have a backup in case he gets hurt again. You can't cut him. I mean, a post June 1st trade would still be $19.2 million dead cap over 2 years. You would have, you would save a little money, but I mean, it's not even worth it. I mean, you're taking on such a cap hit to you might as well try to use him, try to hope for the best, even though he didn't have the best season when he was injured last year. Strengths on this team, they do have a few more strengths than the Tennessee Titans, that's for sure. Having an entirely new staff for the most part. They bring in Spy Tech at GM, new coach, new offensive coordinator, still have Patrick Graham at DC. But, I mean, you have to assume you have someone like Pete Carroll, who is an established, respected head coach in the league. Chip Kelly's already done this once before. So they're going to have some stability in that coaching room. They do have some weapons, especially when you compare them again to Tennessee. They have Jacoby Myers. He had a great season, his best season of his career, 87 catches, 1,000 yards, 4 touchdowns. Brock Bowers, could argue is the best tight end in the NFL going into year 2. He had the 3rd best PFF grade. He had the only thing that you can say that keeps him from being the best tight end is the number of touchdowns. He only had 5 touchdowns, but he had the most receptions by a tight end with 112. He had the most yards by a tight end, 1,194. Records, obviously. And he was a rookie. I mean, I remember his draft stock, I think it was 2 years ago, was, top tier. He was top of the line, tight end. Fell off a little bit last year. Raiders ended up getting him. They thought he may go to the Jets last year, who could have used him for sure as a tight end position. But hindsight's 2020, and now the Raiders have a cornerstone piece for many, many years. Another strength on this team is Max Crosby. I mean, like I said, he's top 5 edge rusher when he's healthy. And the O-line, I mean, we're kind of trying to sift through the bad to find something good at this point, but the O-line is not terrible. So outside of that, there's not really any other strengths, especially when you're losing 17 free agents. They need depth. So depth is definitely not a strength of this team. Okay, when you look at weaknesses, no quarterback of the future. I mean, AOC showed a little bit of promise going into the end of 2024. They signed Gardner Minshew. He started at the beginning of the season. Aiden O'Connell comes in. He showed a few good games at times. I mean, they were 29th in points per game at just over 18 points per game. They have no quarterback. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you would want to see more from Aiden O'Connell to say he's the quarterback of the future. They have no running back. That's why I have them taking Genty at 6. But I mean, there are other options. Free agency, there's quite a few more. You have the likes of Aaron Jones, probably going to end up back in Minnesota. But who I would like to see them take in free agency is Jalen Warren. You know, he was part of that 1-2 do combo in Pittsburgh with Najee Harris. This team had the worst. They had the fewest yards per game on the ground last year, just under 80 rush yards per game, which is the worst. But they were 20th in run block. So, I mean, they were the bottom half, nearing average bottom, you know, and they're in that second tier of 3 tiers of offensive lines. But for them to be last in the run game, is that also kind of skewed because they were behind in every game? I don't know. I mean, they could go get some of the offensive linemen too to shore up the game in the trenches for them. There's some big ones out there. So, I mean, 6 of the top 25 are offensive linemen as far as free agents go. So they could go get 1 or 2. Ball security. That is a weakness for this team in 2024. They were third to last. They had the third most turnovers. They had 1.7 per game, which I think ends up being, what's that? I mean, almost 2 a game, basically. I mean, if you have 2 turnovers a game, it's going to be hard to win those games. So they had 29 on the season. Not ideal. Another weakness is basically the entire, outside of the front 4, the entire back half of that defense. Linebacker, cornerback, safety, weakness. I mean, they were middle of the pack in a lot of stats, but I mean, no one was dominant outside of Max Crosby. And I mean, he was injured. So you need depth, if anything. They were 25th in points per game allowed at 25.5. They gave up the 6th worst EPA per pass. That's expected points added. They give up 0.03 points per pass, or expected points per pass. So I mean, over 40 passes a game. You're looking at, you know, I mean, quite a few points added, you know, as the game goes on. They were 7th in rush yards over expected. You know, they look at what's expected based on their run play, based on who's playing, who's on the field. They allowed 285 rush yards over what was expected for the season, so not ideal. When you watch film on this team, you know, I watched a few games on them, especially the late season game, which are more indicative of what I feel is going into 2025. No matter what, someone was always open, middle of the field. It's just like there's no one around them. Like the average yardage of separation has to be much higher than what the average is in the NFL, because people were always open no matter what. So let's see. All right. Their outlook, keep the depth chart up here. Do they somehow move up for a quarterback? I'm not really sure if they do. Do they stay put at 6? Does Abdul Carter from Penn State, the edge rusher, fall to them? He may be the best talent in this draft class. Pair him with Max Crosby, and then it's more than ideal. I mean, you see what Houston did with Will Anderson and Daniil Hunter, maybe the best duo of 2024 as far as edge rushers go. So maybe you try to replicate that, especially in a division with Bo Nix, who is, I mean, he throws the ball at the line of scrimmage, but I mean, he looked better than what people expected. You got Justin Herbert, you got Patrick Mahomes. You need to get to the quarterback in this division. Do they somehow, and probably be risky to take him, but I mean, they take the top wide receiver talent and Ted McMillan. I mean, pair him with Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers. Definitely would help that receiver room for sure. Or do they take a quarterback later on like I have them taking? Do they take Dylan Gabriel or Jackson Dart? One thing I'm curious to see is they have Chip Kelly at offensive coordinator. Do they go out and sign Justin Fields to another 1-year prove-it contract, or maybe just a 2-year, cheap contract, and let him battle it out with Aiden O'Connell and maybe draft somebody later on? Potentially. I would love to see Chip Kelly or Justin Fields and Chip Kelly's offense. That would be fun to see week in, week out, to say the least. One thing I'm curious is to see if Gardner Minshew stays in this quarterback room. You could get rid of him now and have a 10.8 million dead cap hit, just to not have another quarterback. I don't think he's going to be starting any games in 2025 for this team. If they do, I really don't know what's happening. I mean, I would rather ride with Aiden O'Connell and some rookie that's unproven before I run it back with Gardner Minshew at any point. If he's a pre-June 1st release to save $3 million this year, if he's post-June 1st, you can split it over the next 2 years, 7.8 dead cap this year and $3 million in 2026, and $6 million would be saved this year. So I'm curious. He may be a cap casualty at this point. Get him out the quarterback room and move forward. But I do think the change at head coach and offensive coordinator is definitely going to bring a sense of stability that they haven't had as of late. I thought Antonio Pierce was going to be that guy, but he really was not. I mean, I don't know if he lost the locker room or what happened. They had Devontae Adams. Devontae wanted out after being there. Ends up back in New York. We know how that ended. I just want to really want to see what they do with that quarterback room. And I mean, again, it's kind of like what was going on with Tennessee. You aim to be around 500 for 2025. I think that would be a great goal. You're planning for the future. This is not a quick rebuild. I really do not see them doing what the Commanders did last year. The Commanders took Jaden Daniels at, was it 2 overall, and they flipped their season around to get to the NFC Championship. I don't know what the odds are of them making the AFC Championship, but it's got to be plus 50,000 or more. Like, I don't foresee that happening. You're just trying to take baby steps to build toward the future. And I mean, it would be ideal if you don't have a top 6 pick again next year in 2026, especially when you're in this AFC West. It's going to be hard to compete and get to 500 when you're playing against Denver, the Chargers, and the Chiefs. 6 of your 17 games this year. But like I said, they do have the second most cap space at $95 million. Do they go get someone like Chris Godwin? Do they shore up that back end of that defense like I spoke on with Javon Holland, the safety out of Miami? Carlton Davis, the third. He was with Detroit this year. Got hurt at the end of the year along with everyone else on Detroit's roster on the defensive side. Do they go make a big splashier signing with that? I can see it. So let's look at their schedule. Again, we don't know the order of when they play these games. It's just home and away. Starting, again, they are in this tough division. Denver, KC, and the Chargers. These teams are a tier or two above where the Raiders are at this point. Right now, you got to chalk those up as losses unless something weird happens. Jacksonville, they could compete, but Jacksonville probably win. Tennessee, yeah, they could beat them. It was kind of on the fence when I was talking about Tennessee, but there is a chance that Tennessee is much worse. They could be equally as bad as last year. It's because it's very much a toss-up game between these two, so they could win that one. Dallas, they're a tier above where this Raiders team is as of now. The Giants, they have to get their quarterback. Without a quarterback, the Raiders can win this game. Cleveland, also need a quarterback. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, absolutely not the quarterback of the future there. Deshaun Watson, how much of this season is he going to miss? He had the Achilles tear late in the season. Then you saw him posting on social media all the time, and then it comes out that he had a setback with his recovery. One could speculate it was due to him not following protocol and what he was supposed to do as far as his rehabilitation. Definitely saw a lot of walking around when he probably was not supposed to. So they can win that game. Chicago probably beats the Raiders, but also a plausible win for Las Vegas. Away, they play Denver, KC, and the Chargers again. Chalk them up as losses at this point. Houston, tier above them, a loss. Indy, possibly win it, but probably a loss. Philadelphia, don't need to speak on that. Washington, don't need to speak on that. New England, a possible win. These are away games, so they have a tough away schedule for sure. When you say your away games, you do only have 8. You have more home games than away. I'm not sure if they play any international games in 2025, but when 6 of your 8 away games were against playoff teams from 2024, not ideal. So I mean, I could see them going 5-12, 6-11, kind of like the Titans, but a rough go at it as of now. We're just speculating on what we expect to see for 2025. So let's see. Let's go back, and now we're gonna discuss, like I did with the Titans. We're gonna let's talk about their top players. We discussed them at length, but I mean, just to summarize, they have Brock Bowers, who may be their best player on their roster. He was ranked 3rd, but I mean, he's arguably the best tight end going into 2025. Jordan Meredith, offensive lineman, he was ranked 5th in his position. 0 sacks allowed in 574 snaps. Ideal. You want to see that, especially when you're trying to find your quarterback of the future. Colton Miller is ranked 13th at his position. And then you have Max Crosby, who, if Brock Bowers is not your best player on this team, Max Crosby probably is. He had 7.5 sacks in 12 games, and he gets injured. I want to see him healthy, him and Christian Wilkins for the whole season, see what this defense can do to bounce back from where they were at last year. Since Max Crosby came into the league in 2019, he's 5th in sacks. He has 59.5. Number 1 is TJ Watt with 88. Max Crosby kind of blew up as of late, though, so it's kind of skewed more at sacks on the back end of his career. MVP candidates. MVP, I would say no, but Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, you could make the argument that Max Crosby could be that player if he's healthy for the whole season. I mean, he was great 2 years ago, so there's an opportunity for him to be great again this year. Most improved, didn't talk about this guy much, but Trey Tucker. He was ranked the 5th worst wide receiver per PFF. He only had 47 receptions, 500 yards, 3 touchdowns. So a lot of leeway. It's kind of like J.C. Latham and with the Titans. There's a lot of wiggle room to improve upon where his 2024 season was. Best outcome for this team, and I'm talking absolute ceiling, is having competency in this in the building, having a better culture all around. Chip Kelly's play calling will be improved on what they had last year. Continue to get Brock Bowers the ball. And then they somehow land a quarterback. I kind of hope they don't go the Sam Darnold route. He's gonna call for a lot of money. So I just don't really want them to go break the bank for him. So if they land on a quarterback, I would take Rodgers before I take Sam Darnold. Bring him in. He's gonna get paid regardless. The only thing that with Rodgers is, does he want to go to a team that's not win now? I mean, he has won his Super Bowl, but I feel like he's probably wanting to compete some more. Depends on what he's smoking that day. Maybe not. I don't know. But maybe he's a destination for the Raiders. Bring him in to see, try to build around him, trying to build that culture to build up for the future. To have a quarterback of the future come in and replace Rodgers in the next 2 or 3 years. But I mean, like I said, if you get this team to 500, I think that's ideal. That is a ceiling outcome. 9-8, maybe. You're kind of pushing it at that point. Worst outcome is Aiden O'Connell doesn't improve. You don't find your quarterback of the future in the draft or free agency. I don't think there's really anybody in free agency anyways. And now you've wasted 2 years of Brock Bowers, and you're still needing to build into the future. That's worst outcome. Drop-off candidates. Brock Bowers, I really don't see it happening. I mean, you could make up some scenario that he drops off, but I don't feel like there's anyone on this team that does drop off. X factor for me is whoever the quarterback is. It's going to play a huge role in deciding where this team goes for 2025. So, I mean, in summary, you have Pete Carroll there. They need to figure out the building blocks around Brock Bowers and Max Crosby, I guess, and just keep this team going in the right direction. Don't take another step back. going to be a few years, but I'm curious to see where they go from here. So, in summary, we have 32 Tennessee Titans, 31 the Las Vegas Raiders. Like I said, each week we will continue to build our way up to number one and talk about other things that's coming up, combine, draft, so on and so forth. So as far as the combine goes, it is from February 24th through March 3rd. Different people start to report on different days. It's defensive linemen and linebackers first, then the DBs and tight ends, and then quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs, offensive linemen. You know, a lot of people want to see the 40 times for a lot of these players. The one interesting thing is Travis Hunter is going to report as a cornerback. So we will see how he does. Curious to see what his 40 time is. He needs to be fast for sure. But I mean, if he's not, I don't know. It's so much. I don't know. Tennessee, they really wish that this was a quarterback loaded, like one of the top tier generational talents at quarterback. Not to say there's not, but it's not clear cut for sure. Especially having that number one pick, it's going to be interesting to see what they do and who they have their eyes on at the combine. Each week I also go over whatever's happening this week. Bryce Young's backup, Andy Dalton re-signed there, which I think was ideal. I mean, Bryce Young is going to get the start for 2025, and he looked better as of late in 2025 after he got benched. You know, I thought his career was over in Carolina. Andy Dalton come in. He's definitely a serviceable QB2 for this team. He had 5 games, 66% completion percentage, almost 200 pass yards per game, 7 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He had a 55.4 QBR. If he had qualifying numbers, aka enough snaps, he would have been 19th in the NFL this season. So to me, that is a serviceable QB2, and it's good to have. It seemed like he had a great relationship with Bryce Young, veteran presence going into the future for Bryce Young. The Dolphins let Raheem Mostert go. They save a little bit of money. He's just a $1 million cap hit this year. But I mean, he's 33 years old in April. So, I mean, he's that speedy player that they had in Mike McDaniel's offense. But I mean, it's definitely going to be the Devin Achane show for 2025. In 2024, Raheem Mostert was after he had, 21 total touchdowns, I think 2 years ago, or 21 rushing touchdowns, some unheard number for him at 30 years old at that point, or 31, sorry. He kind of declined. He was 37th ranked running back. It was his worst year since 2021. He had 85 carries for 278 yards at 3.3 yards per carry, second worst of his career. Just 2 total touchdowns, 19 receptions for 161 yards. I mean, you kind of let him go. I mean, he was just taking up space in that running back room, especially at that age. Aaron Rodgers, they informed him that he's going to be let go. I don't think it's been made official yet, but he's going to be a $49 million cap hit for Aaron Glenn in New York. So they're just trying to get rid of him and, move on, go the Russell Wilson route, go ahead and start with a new quarterback in 2025. Don't need this sideshow with Aaron Rodgers. Trading him does no better. So I'm curious to see where he goes. Could he take that veteran minimum contract for a team? You think about the Steelers. That's who I think he could possibly end up with. Him and Mike Tomlin trying to get to 500 together. There's teams such as the Titans. I hope don't really take him. There's no real point. Maybe the Raiders, like I spoke on earlier. Outside of that, the Browns, I mean, they can get him for the veteran minimum and just see what happens. But I don't really know. I don't know. I really think it's Pittsburgh. But time will tell. So being that this, let's see, we got one more topic. And being that this is a Buffalo Bills network with Due Media, I am the one outside source, or if I say the one, they have plenty of opinions and content, but they are Buffalo Bills focused. Every episode is going to come back to Buffalo no matter what. So my thing that I want to talk about this week is what's going to happen with James Cook. Was it a week or so ago? He got on IG Live talking about that he wanted. Somebody said $15 million a year, and he pinned the comment like that. Whatever, he implied that he wants $15 million a year. At $15 million a year, that would put him behind only Christian McCaffrey and Jonathan Taylor for 2025 based on average value. So he's saying he's the third best running back according to pay. Alvin Kamara, Saquon Barkley, and Josh Jacobs are all in that $12 million range. So he wants more than them. Let me give you a few stats for what he did in 2024. He did have right over 1,000 rush yards. He was one of 16 players to have 1,000. 16 rush touchdowns, which was tied for the most last season. 4.9 yards per carry. Out of those players who had 1,000, he was fifth at 4.9 yards per carry. 32 receptions and 258 receiving yards. 26 players did that. This is kind of trying to build the case for him. 18 total touchdowns. With this stat line, it has happened 53 times since the merger. 38 players have done this 53 times, so you had a few repeats. 10 of them are in the Hall of Fame. And then you also have the likes of Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, and Christian McCaffrey, who will be in the Hall of Fame. So 13 of those 38 are Hall of Fame players. So the argument then becomes, is he really great? Or is he Raheem Mostert of 2023, who had 1,012 yards and 21 rushing touchdowns? So you have that argument, that back and forth. My opinion is you let him go. Like I spoke on earlier, running backs are dime a dozen. It's kind of hard to overpay them unless they are Saquon Barkley. They paid him $12 million a year for, I think it's 3 years, so 12 for 36. And you compare that to the likes of the Jags, who took Gabe Davis and paid him 3 for 39, who only had I want to say 200 some odd yards receiving. So unless you're Saquon talent, it's hard to break the bank for a running back, especially when you see year in and year out. Running backs do regress. Even though he's young, they do take a step back, and you can always find them in the draft, especially 4th, 5th, 6th round. You can take those running backs there, and who could have near same numbers or stat line by the end of the season, or running back by committee. They already have Ty Johnson, who I expect them to bring back. He's a free agent, but, I expect them to bring him back in that running back room. And, I mean, look at it like this. The top 10 rushers of 2024, yardage-wise, top 10 rushers, they will have an average salary in 2025 of $7.4 million. He's wanting double that for his salary. So my opinion is replace him and move on. Because, the top 10, again, the top 10 2024, $7.4 million average salary. So you don't have to break the bank to have a top-end running back talent. So my opinion is you have Josh Allen, see what he does. See if he sits out. I don't think he will, but my thoughts are do not give him that pay raise for sure. Another thing I'm curious about is Josh Allen restructuring coming. He's a $44 million cap hit this year. I'm sure they're moving the numbers around. It's coming at some point. They need to make spending room for more weapons for him. They're could be losing Amari Cooper, could be losing Mac Hollins. Do they bring one of them back? Do they go get someone bigger? There's trade targets out there as far as wide receivers. Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel, yeah, maybe. But who I'd like to see is Devontae Adams. Somehow bring him in, give him that physical receiver that they kind of wanted with Keon Coleman. Maybe Keon takes a leap in year 2. Or, maybe they're moving some money around to go get Myles Garrett. To be determined. Myles Garrett's saga is probably not ending anytime soon. Andrew Berry, the GM in Cleveland, definitely has his heels dug in. He is not wanting to let him go. But, if I'm Cleveland, you have that Deshaun Watson contract that you're working with. I rebuild at this point. Myles Garrett says it's not really about the money. He wants to win. I let him go. Get a huge package back. Maybe get 2 firsts and a player, 2 firsts, a third and a player, and start rebuilding. But they got to take care of that before the draft. So maybe that's what the Bills are going to work around this money with. To be determined. But that's all I have for tonight. Like I said, we had 32 Titans. I'm sorry, Titans fans. I'm sorry, Raiders fans. But as of now, those two are the two worst teams. Next week, we will do 2 more teams, and there will be a lot of weeks we'll have one, but at the bottom, we're going to do 2 at a time to keep it moving. We do have the tags that have opened up. They can start tagging people. T. Higgins is rumored to be tagged again, which is unfortunate for him. Outside of that, there's not really many tag options. Trey Smith in Kansas City, to be seen. But I mean, they got a lot of workarounds that they have to do with that cap space or lack thereof in Kansas City. So I think he's going to be gone. But until then, we will be back next week with 2 more teams. You can follow me on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at King NFL Stats. Please come back next week and, leave your comments. Let me know your thoughts. Follow me on Instagram, same handle, King NFL Stats, and also on TikTok as well, where I post breakdowns, miniature breakdowns of what we're discussing here, along with free agency, franchise tags, and whatever else may come up in the news with NFL. Appreciate you stopping by. See you next week.